Hey, hello, my name is Arthur Grouse, and in this video we're going to take a look at the Lakehouse. But first let's start with the data warehouse, something everybody is familiar with. We just have a SQL Server database with all the data ingested in there from different source systems, and maybe modeled it like factor dimensions, like a dimensional database, like a data mart, and on top of that we created all our reports. And we use ETL tools like Azure Data Factory or SSIS back in the days to import the data. This works perfectly fine, and still a lot of my customers use this architecture. What is the downside? If you have a lot of data, then it scales out poorly. It's very expensive to have like a really big data warehouse, like with big data. And a lot of times, for example, machine learning specialists and data scientists, they want the raw data, the not cleaned up data, to do the analysis. And that's not possible with the data warehouse. So these are a few problems with the old architecture. And then came along the data lake. In Azure, for example, you can use the blob storage or the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. This storage is very cheap, so it's really cheap to have a lot of data in there, terabytes of data, raw data that can be used for the data scientists to do the analysis and the machine learning. But if you want to do traditional reporting, and then this raw data is not so suitable. So you don't want to do reporting on top of CSV files, for example, or Parquet files. So what we normally did then is we built some ETL to put it in the data warehouse again, in the factor dimensional tables, and we had basically both. The data warehouse for the normal reporting, BI reporting, and the data lake for the big data scenarios. Isn't it possible to have like the best of both worlds? Yes, it is, and that's what the Lakehouse is all about. First introduced by Databricks, called the Delta Lake, using Delta Lake technology. And that's also the case in Fabric. If you create a Lakehouse in Fabric, it's built on top of Delta Lake. And Delta Lake itself is built on top of Parquet files. Parquet files are column store index files, a little bit the same like Power BI uses in their models. The Vertipack engine also uses columnar storage. In SQL Server you have the column store index. That's basically the same technology. And on top of that they built a transaction log so that you can really do transactions. And this intermediate layer that they built, with that it's possible to create transactions, asset transactions, so you can really keep track of what the changes were, and you can also roll back transactions. So basically now these Parquet files in the Delta format, they're like database tables. Each Parquet file is like a table that you can query to get your data. And that's why they built a SQL endpoint on top of that. And you can use just the normal SQL APIs, meaning T-SQL, to connect from regular tools to this table like structure. Like Management Studio you can use, Power BI Desktop you can use Excel to connect to these tables using the SQL endpoint. But on the other hand, if you want to write data, then you use the Spark engine. And you can use notebooks and PySpark to insert data. But you can also use SQL, but then the Spark SQL variant. It's a little bit the same, but it has some small differences. And also the data scientists and the machine learning specialists, they can connect to the raw data if they like, and they can do their thing. Everything is saved in this Delta Lake, data lake format using the Parquet and the transaction log. And this is what I call also one lake. One lake is the storage system where all these Delta files are stored, and there you can use it. If you look at the whole picture, that like it was introduced in 2023, here we can see the one lake with the Lakehouse and the warehouse, and the nice thing is they have the same Delta Parquet format. So they're using both the Delta files, the Parquet files, to store the data. One big difference, if you want to insert data in the Lakehouse you need to use the Spark engine, while in the warehouse you use the T-SQL engine. So you can use the Management Studio or regular clients to connect to the database like always, and then do insert, update, delete. So you can always also use all the other ETL tools that you used to get the data into the warehouse. A common architecture that you come across a lot of times in lakehouses is the Medallion architecture. What does this mean? The first layer you're going to build is the bronze layer. You ingest the raw data, for example, REST APIs that you connect to, or SQL Server databases or CSV files. You just ingest them into Parquet files, like the raw data. And then the second layer is the refined layer. So you're going to refine the data, clean it up, do some cleansing, and then just save it in Delta tables. So with the transactional support and the transaction log. And then the third layer is the gold layer, like the dimensional layer, the data mart, where you have your fact and dimension tables. Basically the same architecture that you can also see a lot of times with Databricks. A lot of things that apply to Databricks also apply the same to Fabric lakehouses. Because let's face it, the Delta Lake technology was invented by Databricks.